Did hear Matt in that update say that that annual two-gamer with Detroit is coming. That is the dumbest scheduling Major League Baseball does. That should be replaced with Cleveland and or Baltimore every year. Nobody wants to see the Pirates play the Tigers.
Conversely, nobody from Detroit is excited to see the Pirates come to town.
No. Replace it geographically with one of the two closer AL teams. Now, luckily they do play, not luckily, but they play Baltimore this year because of the AL East.
Right.
But replace it with one of those two teams.
It would make way too much sense.
Or Toronto even give me. Give me Toronto in a nice nobody wants to go to Detroit.
No.
Detroit sucks.
Yeah.
It's like Braddock but bigger. Nobody wants to go there. It's terrible. Good morning. Fan Morning Show presented by Matt Mertz Plumbing, now part of the Armstrong Comfort Solutions family. Lots to get into. Let's get into it right now with the Pittsburgh Steelers and their draft. You know what you have to do at work today? Well, you had to do it over the weekend. You actually had to do it Sunday. It was your holy day of obligation to assign a grade to what you thought the Steelers' draft picks were.
It's written into our contracts. We have to do it today.
Not just us, but people that are just regular Joes. Yeah. Everybody out there what did you think of the Steelers? Okay, what letter grade?
Give me a grade.
Now, let's start with the quarterbacks. Mike Tomlin, of course, was asked about Kenny Pickett and asked about, what's going on with the depth chart?
I haven't even begun to think about that, to be quite honest with you.
All right.
We got so much more work ahead of us from a classroom perspective. And things of that nature as we push into phase 2 and so forth of our offseason, that'll clear itself up, I'm sure.
Fair point, Michael. One that I buy from you, and I think one that is the absolute right answer. Now, Jerry Dulac, the esteemed football writer and golf writer of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So Jerry Dulac writes, as he breaks down this draft and assigns a letter grade of a C overall to the draft, which we can agree or disagree with. We'll move on. But Jerry writes that it will be measured solely on Pickett's success and whether it was the right move. Solely may be a bit strong, but I see where Jerry's getting at. People will remember this draft for the Kenny Pickett draft. There's no question about that.
Long term, when we look back on this draft and say 10 to 12 years, he's absolutely right. It will be all about, oh, yeah, that's the year they drafted Kenny Pickett 20th, and another quarterback didn't go for what felt like a week and a half, and then Pickett ended up being okay, but not very good. Or it'll be, yeah, man, that's the year they got Pickett. And we look at what he's done. He's built a career for himself. They've gone to the play. Oh, they've gone to the conference championship. Oh, they went to the Super Bowl. All that. And anywhere in between on that spectrum, yes, absolutely. Long term, it will be as much about Kenny Pickett as it will be anything else. And that's not any disrespect to the other 6 guys they took. It's just the truth.
Right. And he writes also, Jerry does, because I think that he wrote a very nice dissertation on this. Do I agree that C? That's probably a little low. I go B- or maybe even a B. But he writes in this that did they need a quarterback was the biggest question to come out of all this. Did they truly need a quarterback? And he said in their words, pretty much, the Steelers need to find starters among their first 3 picks. And the only starter that's a surefire lock, nailed down starter of their first 3 picks is George Pickens, the wide receiver from Georgia. That's the 2nd round pick. I would agree to that as well.
I would argue that Kenny Pickett should be a starter week 1, and if he's not a starter, then something has gone wrong between now and week 1 of the regular season. I'd say you got 2 starters in those top 3, but I also get where he's coming from in that regard as well. I do understand Jerry's criticism, and I'm right around a B as well. B because here's my issue with the draft, the Steelers draft in totality. Is I really like the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round picks, which is, I guess, what we expected when we were told months ago that this was a middle-heavy draft, right? That the middle rounds were where the bulk of the talent was. I like Pickens. Looks like he could be a little bit of a head case. We don't know. Looks like he may pop off occasionally and draw the occasional 15-yard flag for throwing a defender into a wall. Hey, it happens, I guess. DeMarvin Leal, I like that pick. He's a slighter Stephon Tuitt, I guess. A smaller Stephon Tuitt is how I see him playing out in the future. Calvin Austin has a chance to be that jitterbug, Matt Canada kind of Swiss Army knife. I like that pick. My issue was with late in the draft, and they didn't address some positional needs. They drafted another little brother at a position where they already have a little brother. And the biggest part of this, if you're going to try and give it a letter grade, right? Mm-hmm. It's like trying to give a letter grade for a class where the final project hasn't been turned in yet. Because to go back to Jerry's original point and what we started talking about, It's all about Pickett at 20th overall.
Yeah, I can't get mad at the Connor Hayward draft pick. I can't. I think it fills special teams' need. I look at the tight end room and what they have in Freiermuth and Gentry, and that he'll backfill there. He'll help there. They don't use a fullback all that much, so he won't help with a fullback, but he'll be the third tight end. And there have been times where they have employed the third tight end, and there have been a lot of times in which Gentry and or Freiermuth have not been healthy, and Rader has got a helmet. I don't mind that, and then you fill in and figure out, because Zach Gentry was drafted in 19. He's not going to be around all that much longer. I don't mind it as it doesn't kill me as a 6th-round pick to take Connor Hayward, who won't be a fullback. He'll be a tight end.
Yeah, and I don't dislike Connor Hayward. Like Connor Hayward, we saw him in the bowl game against Pitt, right? We know the kid, he's a Hayward, right? So we know he's going to be uber competitive. That it's a great feel-good story. I just thought with the late picks, Connor Hayward included, and the camp arm, Chris Oladokin, the South Dakota State quarterback in the 7th round, that there were opportunities to nab other guys that had fallen way down the draft board as depth guys who earlier, before they dealt with injuries in their final season in college, were probably more like 4th rounders and had fallen a lot, and they had a chance to do that. They didn't, but again, this draft is not going to be made or won or lost on those 5th, 6th, 7th round picks.
The only pick I didn't really like was the quarterback from South Dakota State. Positionally, you can go and find a camp arm anywhere. Charlie Batch can be a camp arm for you if you really need one. So you don't waste a draft pick. You take a flyer on someone that could potentially step up and stop the run. You take a flyer on someone like what turned out to be Ramon Foster, who wasn't drafted, and he ended up playing 1,000,000 games for you on the offensive line. Take a lineman there and hope that it helps. But I will say this about the draft. What Kevin Colbert gave this team, or left this team, in the last 2 drafts, for me is glaring. He saw and he surveyed the scene around the National Football League. Now, do they still have a problem maybe stopping the run and maybe a little bit on the edge on defense? Yes. But he looked around and think about what he left this football team in the last 2 drafts. He left them what should be a superstar running back. He left them a 1st-round quarterback. He left them a tight end who is really good. And he left them a bevy of receivers, 2 receivers, one at 52 and one that I think is electric. For some reason, I bet on Memphis games this year, so I watched Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin walks on the field. He is the fastest Pittsburgh Steeler right now. There's no question about that.
They've added a lot of speed the last couple of years.
He left them 2 receivers that are really good. And even in the past 3 years or so, Chase Claypool was the first player taken. He has tried to match this speed and offensive skill arms race. Will it play out? I don't know. But that's a big shift in Kevin Colbert's philosophy for the last 3 years, so to speak, that on his way out the door. And
they had to, right? I mean, look at, I forget the number. I want to say it was, and I apologize to whoever tweeted it out. I should have bookmarked it. But there was a number I saw tweeted out over the weekend about the number of players remaining on the offensive side of the ball, in particular, from that playoff loss to Cleveland a couple years ago. And it's minute. They have completely remade the offense in just a couple of short years, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's the skill position players. Go back and look at the roster from that night where they just fell to pieces against the Browns in the wild card game.
Right.
And the offense is completely different.
Oh, and I'll tell you this. One thing that the draft also did for me, and if you're you don't have to be a savvy Steeler fan to know this, it screams that they are comfortable left to right. Dan Moore, Dotson, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and Chooks. That to me, and Kendrick Green, I don't know. Will he start at one of the guards? He'll have to beat out Dotson or he'll have to beat out Daniels. And a guy like John LeGlue maybe becomes a swing guy. Who knows what happens? Or Joe Haig becomes a swing guy. They are comfortable, though, with Moore, Dotson, Cole, Kendrick Green or Daniels, and Chooks. They think that what they got in free agency is good enough offensive line-wise.
Yeah, and, I don't know about Mason Cole. I really like the signing of the dude from the Bears, the guard.
James
like
Daniels.
That. Daniels, thank you. But Cole at center, I think maybe they're just counting on the fact that
or they like J.C. Hassenauer.
That a Hassenauer type guy will just step in if Cole proves he's not ready for it. But I mean,
but we screamed offensive line. The city screamed offensive line. The Steelers go, We got enough guys in house, and that
we also screamed corner the last
Correct.
couple of weeks too. And again, I'm not going to sit here and argue that a draft is won or lost based on 6th and 7th round picks. But you brought up the Camp Arm quarterback taken in the 7th round. I brought up Connor Hayward. And there were guys out there, Donovan West, the center from Arizona State, Josh Jobe, the corner from Alabama, who only fell completely out of people's draft boards because of injuries last year. And those are guys that, again, before they were injured, were 4th round grades or so. And so if you take a flyer on one of those guys in the 7th round instead of that Camp Arm quarterback, or in the 6th round instead of a fullback, H-back, hybrid type, tight end type who's only 5'10", then that would have made a lot more sense to me.
Here's a thought. Do you circle back and ask Joe Hayden what he's doing next year?
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
he may work for cheaper. He may survey the scene and look around and say, well, I didn't have a lot of takers right now. Now it's after the draft. He may tell him, you know what, jump in the lake because you guys did me wrong.
Right.
But I think it might be a savvy business move to take a run at Joe and say, you know, Joe, let's try to patch this up and fix it.
Let me ask you this. Is he better than Arthur Mollett or Justin Lane?
One would think that he gives you at least the same chance of winning, even at his advanced age, that those two guys do. If you asked me right now if it was 3rd and 9 and you knew it was a passing down and you needed one stop, who I trust more, Joe Hayden rises to the top of that.
Absolutely.
There's no question. So I think it might be a smart business move.
There's no reason not to circle back around to him.